Your soul has been writing your story across thousands of years, recording every thought, every choice, every triumph and failure in a cosmic library that exists beyond time and space. Edgar Cayce, the most documented psychic in American history, spent 43 years accessing this infinite database during deep trance states, and he revealed something that contradicts what most spiritual teachers tell you. You don't need to be psychic to read your own records. In fact, according to Cayce's readings, you're already accessing fragments of your Akashic records every single night in your dreams, during moments of déjà vu, and in those inexplicable pulls towards certain places, people, or purposes that you can't rationally explain. The question isn't whether you can access this cosmic record of your soul's journey. The question is whether you're spiritually prepared to handle what you'll discover about who you've been, what you've done, and why you're really here in this lifetime. What truth about your soul's past are you avoiding that's blocking your spiritual evolution right now? Edgar Cayce didn't stumble upon the Akashic records through mystical accident or divine favor. For over 4 decades, this unassuming man from Kentucky entered self-induced trance states and accessed what he called the Book of Life, delivering over 14,000 documented readings that revealed intimate details about people's past lives, karmic patterns, and soul missions. But here's what most people miss when they romanticize Cayce's gift. He spent years developing the spiritual discipline, moral purity, and Christ-centered consciousness required to access these records without distorting them through ego or personal agenda. The Akashic records aren't a spiritual toy or party trick. They're the universe's complete memory system, and Cayce warned repeatedly that attempting to access them without proper spiritual preparation could lead to confusion, deception, or worse, spiritual inflation that destroys your humility before God. So what exactly are the Akashic records according to Cayce's actual teachings? In his readings, Cayce described them as an energetic imprint of every soul's journey, existing in what he called the borderland between time and eternity. Imagine a dimension where past, present, and potential futures coexist simultaneously, where every thought you've ever had, every word you've spoken, every intention behind every action across all your incarnations is recorded with perfect accuracy. This isn't metaphorical. Cayce explained that these records exist as actual vibrational patterns in the mental and spiritual planes, accessible to those who've developed the consciousness to perceive beyond physical reality. Your Akashic record contains the complete story of your soul. Every lifetime you've lived, every relationship you've formed, every lesson you've learned or failed to learn, every karmic debt you've accumulated, and every spiritual gift you've developed across the ages. But here's where Cayce's teachings become personally urgent, rather than abstractly fascinating. He explained that you're not just passively recorded in the Akashic records, you're actively writing new entries every single moment through your thoughts, words, and deeds in this present life. Every choice you make today becomes part of your eternal record, influencing the conditions you'll face in future incarnations and the spiritual opportunities or limitations you're creating for your soul's evolution. Are you writing a story of spiritual growth and service to others, or are you inscribing patterns of selfishness and spiritual stagnation that you'll be forced to confront in lives to come? This is the sobering reality that Cayce wanted people to understand. The Akashic records aren't just about satisfying curiosity about past lives. They're about taking responsibility for the soul you're becoming right now. Cayce was absolutely clear that accessing your Akashic records isn't about learning a technique or performing a ritual. It's about becoming the kind of person whose consciousness naturally resonates with higher spiritual dimensions. In his readings, he emphasized that the primary requirement is developing what he called attunement with the Christ consciousness, which he described not as religious doctrine, but as the universal pattern of perfect spiritual alignment that Jesus demonstrated in his earthly ministry. This means cultivating unconditional love, surrendering personal will to divine will, purifying your motivations until they're focused entirely on spiritual service rather than ego gratification, and maintaining such consistent meditation practice that your mind becomes still enough to perceive subtle spiritual information. The practical pathway Cayce outlined for accessing the Akashic records begins with meditation, but not the casual mindfulness practice that's become trendy in modern wellness culture. Cayce meant deep, disciplined, daily meditation, where you systematically quiet the endless chatter of your conscious mind and learn to perceive the whispers of your higher self and the divine intelligence that permeates all existence. He recommended beginning each meditation with prayer that establishes your spiritual intention and protection, then using a specific ideal or spiritual affirmation to focus your consciousness. For accessing the Akashic records specifically, Cayce suggested affirmations that align your will with divine purpose, such as invoking the Christ consciousness as your guide and protector in exploring the records of your soul's journey. Here's a truth that might disappoint those seeking quick spiritual shortcuts. Cayce indicated that most people require months or even years of consistent spiritual practice before they develop the sensitivity to consciously access their Akashic records with any reliability. But he also revealed something encouraging that gets overlooked in the mystique surrounding this topic. You're already receiving information from your Akashic records constantly through channels you might be dismissing or misinterpreting. Those recurring dreams that feel more real than waking life. Cayce said these often contain actual memories from past incarnations stored in your soul's record. That inexplicable phobia you've had since childhood, with no traumatic origin in this lifetime. It may be bleeding through from a death experience in a previous life recorded in your Akashic field. The instant recognition you felt meeting certain people, as if you've known them forever. Cayce explained this as your soul accessing the records of relationships that span multiple incarnations. The challenge isn't accessing the Akashic records. The challenge is learning to recognize when you're receiving information from them and developing the spiritual discernment to interpret that information accurately. This is where Cayce's warnings become crucial. He observed countless people who thought they were accessing their Akashic records, but were actually tapping into their own wishful thinking, receiving distorted information from lower astral entities, or manufacturing elaborate fantasies that fed their ego's desire to feel special or important. How do you know the difference? Cayce said genuine information from the Akashic records always serves your spiritual growth, always increases your humility and compassion, always aligns with universal spiritual laws, and always moves you toward greater service to others and closer relationship with God. If you like this video and want to continue exploring Edgar Cayce's profound spiritual teachings, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We're building a community of genuine spiritual seekers who value truth over entertainment, and your support helps us continue creating content that honors Cayce's legacy with integrity. Let's talk about the practical techniques Cayce actually recommended for developing access to your Akashic records, stripped of the New Age additions that have accumulated around this topic over the decades. First, establish a consistent meditation practice at the same time and place each day, ideally early morning, when your consciousness is less cluttered by daily concerns. Cayce emphasized that regularity creates a spiritual pathway that becomes easier to travel with repetition. Second, purify your physical body through diet and lifestyle choices that support rather than hinder spiritual sensitivity. Cayce recommended reducing or eliminating meat, avoiding alcohol and drugs that cloud consciousness, and maintaining physical health through proper rest and exercise. Your body is the temple through which your soul operates in physical reality, and Cayce insisted that a toxic or depleted body makes higher spiritual perception nearly impossible. Third, work extensively with your dreams, which Cayce called the most accessible portal to higher consciousness for most people. Keep a detailed dream journal and ask before sleep to be shown information from your Akashic records that would benefit your current life situation. Cayce explained that during sleep, your consciousness naturally shifts to the same dimension where the Akashic records exist, making dream state one of the most reliable access points for this information. Fourth, develop your intuition through practice and trust. Start noticing the subtle impressions, the quiet knowing, the gentle nudges that arise from beneath your conscious thinking. Cayce taught that these intuitive perceptions are often your higher self accessing information from your soul's records and translating it into feelings and insights your conscious mind can grasp. But here's where Cayce's approach becomes radically different from most contemporary teaching on this subject. He insisted that the ultimate purpose of accessing your Akashic records isn't to satisfy curiosity about who you were in past lives or to gain spiritual bragging rights. The purpose is to understand your current life mission more clearly, to recognize the karmic patterns you're here to resolve, to identify the spiritual gifts you've developed across incarnations that you're meant to use in service now, and to comprehend the soul lessons you contracted to learn in this particular lifetime. Are you living in alignment with your soul's purpose, or are you repeating the same patterns of avoidance and distraction that have blocked your spiritual evolution across multiple lifetimes? Cayce revealed that your Akashic records contain not just your past, but also your potential futures, the branching pathways of possibility that open or close based on the choices you make today. This is perhaps the most empowering aspect of his teaching on this subject. You're not locked into a predetermined fate. Yes, you carry karmic patterns and tendencies from past lives, but through conscious spiritual development and alignment with Christ consciousness, you can rewrite your soul's trajectory. The records show you where you've been and where you're headed, but they also reveal the decision points where you can choose transformation over repetition, growth over stagnation, service over selfishness. Let me share what Cayce said happens when someone successfully accesses their Akashic records with proper spiritual preparation and pure intention. First, there's often a profound sense of recognition, a feeling of coming home to yourself across all your incarnations. You begin to understand the through line of your soul's evolution, seeing how experiences in past lives connect to your current strengths, weaknesses, relationships, and challenges. Second, there's typically an overwhelming sense of responsibility and humility. When you truly grasp the karmic consequences of your actions across time, when you see the ripple effects of your choices impacting other souls across multiple lifetimes, it becomes impossible to maintain casual spiritual attitude or to treat your current life as insignificant. Third, and this is what Cayce emphasized most strongly, genuine access to the Akashic records produces practical change in how you live now. You gain clarity about your life purpose and the specific contributions you're meant to make. You recognize the people in your life who share karmic connections with you and understand the lessons you're meant to learn together. You identify the destructive patterns you've carried across lifetimes and gain the motivation to finally break free from them. You discover talents and abilities you've developed in past lives that lie dormant in this lifetime, waiting to be reactivated through practice and dedication. Most importantly, you experience a deepening commitment to spiritual growth and service that transcends this single lifetime, because you now comprehend yourself as an eternal soul on a long journey toward reunion with your Creator. But Cayce also warned about the dangers that arise when people access the Akashic records prematurely or with impure motivation. Some become obsessed with past life identities, particularly if they discover they were someone famous or powerful, and this feeds spiritual ego that directly opposes the humility required for genuine growth. Others use information about past lives as excuse for current failures, claiming their struggles are just karmic carryover, rather than taking responsibility for their choices now. Still others become so fascinated with the cosmic drama of their soul's journey across time that they neglect the simple, practical spiritual work required in their present circumstances. The Akashic records are meant to illuminate your path forward, not to become a distraction from walking that path with dedication and faith. Here's a question Cayce would want you to contemplate deeply. Why do you want to access your Akashic records? Is it genuine desire for spiritual growth and better alignment with God's will for your life? Or is it spiritual curiosity, desire for special knowledge that makes you feel evolved, or escape from the challenging work of dealing with your current life as it actually is? Your motivation determines whether accessing this information will accelerate your spiritual evolution or become another form of spiritual materialism that ultimately leaves you more disconnected from your true purpose. Please take a moment now to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What aspect of your soul's journey would most help you to understand right now? Are you willing to do the spiritual preparation necessary to receive this knowledge with wisdom and humility? Cayce taught that the Akashic records operate according to specific spiritual laws that govern how and when souls can access this information. One crucial law is that you can only access information that serves your current spiritual development. The records won't reveal things that would overwhelm you, inflate your ego, or distract you from lessons you need to learn through direct experience. This divine wisdom protects you from spiritual information you're not ready to handle responsibly. Another law is that accessing others' Akashic records without their permission and genuine need violates spiritual ethics. Cayce would access people's records during readings only when asked, and only with intention to serve their healing and growth, never for manipulation or control. The records also respond to the spiritual principle Cayce called the law of like attracting like. The purer your spiritual vibration through meditation, prayer, and ethical living, the more clearly and accurately you can perceive information from higher dimensions where the records exist. Conversely, if you're operating from lower vibrational states like anger, fear, greed, or pride, you'll either be blocked from accessing the records entirely, or you'll tune into distorted information from lower astral planes that masquerade as Akashic wisdom but actually lead you astray. This is why Cayce insisted that spiritual purification isn't optional preparation for this work. It's the very foundation that determines whether your experience will be genuine or delusional. Let's examine the specific signs Cayce identified that indicate you're successfully accessing authentic Akashic information versus fabricating experiences through imagination or wishful thinking. Authentic access produces information that surprises you, challenges your assumptions, or reveals connections you couldn't have consciously invented. It often brings up emotions that feel disproportionate to your current life circumstances because they're connected to experiences from past incarnations. It provides specific, verifiable insights about your current relationships, challenges, and opportunities that prove accurate when you test them through action. And most importantly, it always moves you toward greater love, service, forgiveness, and surrender to divine will. If your Akashic insights are making you feel superior to others, justifying your resentments, or encouraging spiritual bypass of your current responsibilities, you're not accessing the genuine records. Cayce revealed something that might shock modern spiritual seekers who approach the Akashic records as neutral cosmic filing cabinet. The records themselves have consciousness and intelligence. They're not passive information storage. They're living spiritual reality, animated by divine consciousness that responds to your intention, your spiritual development, and your readiness to receive truth. This means that what you perceive in the records is always perfectly calibrated to what you need for your growth at this exact moment in your soul's journey. Two people accessing their records might receive entirely different information because they're at different stages of spiritual development and require different insights to move forward on their unique paths. This brings us to the most profound aspect of Cayce's teaching on the Akashic records. They reveal that your life is not random. Every relationship, every challenge, every opportunity, every suffering, and every joy is connected to your soul's larger story across time. You chose this lifetime, these parents, this body, these circumstances as the optimal conditions for resolving specific karma and advancing toward your ultimate spiritual goal. Your Akashic records contain the blueprint of this soul contract, the agreement you made before incarnating about what you would accomplish and contribute in this particular life. Are you honoring that contract, or have you become so lost in the illusions and distractions of physical existence that you've forgotten why you're here? Cayce explained that one of the most valuable uses of Akashic access is identifying what he called karmic grace, the unexpected blessings and opportunities that appear in your life as reward for positive actions in previous incarnations. These aren't random luck. They're the universe returning to you the good you've put out across multiple lifetimes. Similarly, the seemingly unfair hardships and obstacles you face often represent karmic debts being repaid or lessons you failed to learn in past lives, now presenting themselves again with increased urgency. Understanding this through your Akashic records doesn't mean passive acceptance of suffering. It means engaging with your challenges as opportunities for soul growth rather than meaningless punishment. And it means recognizing your blessings as evidence of your soul's positive contributions across time. The pathway to accessing your Akashic records that Cayce outlined ultimately requires one thing above all else: radical honesty with yourself about your spiritual state. You cannot manipulate or trick your way into these higher dimensions of consciousness. You cannot access profound spiritual truth while living in denial about your own faults, fears, and failures. The records respond to authenticity, to souls who are willing to see themselves clearly, to acknowledge their darkness as well as their light, to take responsibility for their karma, rather than playing victim to circumstances. This is why Cayce emphasized that the real spiritual work isn't learning special techniques for Akashic access. It's becoming a person of such integrity, humility, and Christ-like love that higher consciousness becomes your natural state. Consider this uncomfortable question. What are you afraid you'll discover if you successfully access your Akashic records? What past life mistakes do you suspect you made that you're still carrying shame about? What karmic debts do you fear you owe? What soul mission do you suspect you're avoiding in this lifetime because it would require too much courage, sacrifice, or change? Your resistance to accessing the records often points directly to the information that would most transform your current life if you had the strength to face it with honesty and faith. Cayce taught that the Akashic records reveal ultimate spiritual truth. You are not your current personality, your current body, your current life circumstances. You are an eternal soul that has lived countless lives and will live countless more until you achieve such complete union with Christ consciousness that you transcend the need for physical incarnation entirely. Your true identity spans millennia. Your current life, which feels so all-consuming and important, is one chapter in a vast cosmic novel your soul is writing across the ages. Does this perspective diminish the importance of your current choices and actions? Absolutely not. It amplifies them to infinite significance because every choice you make now becomes part of your eternal record, influencing the trajectory of your soul's evolution across all future incarnations. The question isn't whether you can access your Akashic records. The question is whether you're willing to live the kind of spiritually disciplined, ethically committed, Christ-centered life that makes you capable of perceiving and properly interpreting the information they contain. Are you willing to meditate daily, even when it's boring or difficult? Are you willing to purify your lifestyle even when it requires sacrifice? Are you willing to examine your motivations with ruthless honesty even when you don't like what you discover? Are you willing to surrender your ego's agenda and truly seek only what serves your soul's highest growth and God's will for your life? These are the real requirements for Akashic access, according to Edgar Cayce, and they're infinitely more challenging than any technique or ritual. Your Akashic records are waiting. They've been waiting across all your lifetimes, patiently holding the complete truth of who you are, who you've been, and who you're becoming. They contain the answers to your deepest questions about purpose, relationships, talents, and destiny. They offer the roadmap for your spiritual evolution and the revelation of your soul's mission in this crucial lifetime. But they're not a destination you arrive at through clever methodology. They're a state of consciousness you grow into through dedicated spiritual transformation. The only real question is whether you'll begin that transformation today or continue postponing it, adding another day, another month, another year, perhaps another lifetime to the record of a soul who knew what was required but chose comfort over growth, distraction over dedication, ego over divine will. What will your Akashic record say about who you chose to be today? Edgar Cayce revealed something that shatters every comfortable belief about what happens when you die. The moment your heart stops isn't an ending, but the beginning of the most critical phase of your soul's existence, a period between physical lives where every choice you make determines whether your next incarnation brings spiritual advancement or karmic regression. In his trance states, Cayce described a realm he called the interlife, or between-life state, where souls don't simply rest on clouds playing harps, but undergo intensive review, planning, and preparation for their return to Earth. You don't just randomly reincarnate, you actively participate in designing your next life's challenges, selecting the family that will best facilitate your spiritual lessons, and even choosing the specific karmic debts you're ready to resolve. The beings you encounter in this realm aren't strangers, but souls you've known across hundreds of lifetimes, and the decisions you make there are binding contracts your higher self commits to fulfilling once you're born again. Most shocking of all, Cayce explained that some souls become so attached to the illusion of physical existence that they remain trapped near Earth, unable to ascend to higher dimensions where real spiritual growth occurs. If your consciousness survives death intact, and you're immediately thrust into making decisions that shape your next 80 years of existence, shouldn't you know what's waiting for you on the other side before that moment arrives? Share below. If you could remember your between-life planning session before this current life began, what do you think you chose to learn? The moment after your final heartbeat, when medical instruments declare you dead, and doctors step back from your body, your consciousness doesn't extinguish like a candle flame. It explodes into an awareness so vast and multidimensional that your current waking state will seem like you've been living your entire life with your eyes closed. Edgar Cayce's readings on the between-life state aren't comforting bedtime stories about peaceful rest in heaven. They're detailed accounts of the most consequential period in your soul's journey, a time when you're fully awake to your eternal nature and must make choices that will echo across your next incarnation and possibly lifetimes beyond. According to Cayce, the transition from physical death to the between-life state happens in stages, and understanding these stages is crucial because how you navigate them determines everything that follows. The first moments after death are what Cayce called the silver cord separation. That instant, when the energetic tether connecting your consciousness to your physical body finally severs. Most souls experience this as a sudden expansion, like being compressed in a tight box your entire life, and suddenly finding yourself in infinite space. Time stops functioning the way it does in physical reality. Past, present, and future become simultaneously accessible. You can perceive multiple dimensions at once. But here's what Cayce emphasized that makes this so critical. Not all souls transition smoothly. Some remain so psychologically attached to physical existence, so identified with their material life and body, that they resist the transition. They hover near Earth, attempting to interact with the physical world they've left behind. Cayce called these earthbound souls, and he explained that they often remain trapped in this state for what we would measure as years or even decades, unable to ascend to the higher dimensions where actual soul development occurs. They're not technically suffering in the traditional sense of hellfire and torment, but they're stuck, unable to progress, unable to access the wisdom and guidance available in higher realms. What causes a soul to become earthbound? Cayce identified several factors: intense attachment to material possessions or physical pleasures, unresolved anger or desire for revenge against someone who wronged them, extreme fear of divine judgment based on misunderstanding of spiritual law, lack of spiritual preparation during physical life, leaving the soul confused about what's happening, sudden or traumatic death that creates disorientation. In Cayce's cosmology, these earthbound souls aren't abandoned. Spiritual helpers constantly work to guide them toward the light, to help them release their attachments and ascend. But they have free will, and some stubbornly cling to earthly consciousness for disturbingly long periods. For souls who successfully transition, those who release physical attachments and allow themselves to ascend, the first major experience is what Cayce called the life review. This isn't the simplified version you've heard about in near-death experience accounts, where you see your life flash before your eyes. It's an intensive, comprehensive examination of every thought, every action, every choice you made during the life you just completed. But here's what makes it genuinely transformative. You don't just observe your actions from your own perspective. You experience them from the perspective of every person you affected. Think about what that means. Every kindness you showed, you now feel exactly as the recipient felt it. The warmth, the gratitude, the impact it had on their day or their life. But also, every cruelty, every harsh word, every moment of indifference to someone's suffering, you experience that from their side. You feel the pain you caused as if it were inflicted on you. This isn't punishment administered by some external judge. It's the natural consequence of consciousness, expanding beyond the ego-limited perspective you had during physical life. Your higher self, no longer constrained by the defensive mechanisms and justifications your physical mind used, sees everything with perfect clarity and perfect empathy. Cayce explained that this review isn't about inducing guilt or shame, though souls often experience those emotions as they witness their mistakes. The purpose is education. The between-life state is essentially an intensive spiritual classroom, and the life review is your first major lesson, understanding the actual consequences of how you lived. No one judges you except yourself. No external deity condemns you, but your own soul, seeing clearly for the first time how you measured against your own ideals and the spiritual laws you knew were true, renders a verdict far harsher than any external judgment could be. After the life review comes what Cayce described as the evaluation and planning phase, and this is where his teachings become truly fascinating. You don't remain in this review state forever. Eventually, often with the guidance of what Cayce called soul groups or counselors, more advanced beings who assist in the between-life realm, you begin analyzing what lessons you failed to learn in your previous incarnation. What patterns kept repeating? What opportunities for spiritual growth did you miss? What karmic debts did you create that now must be balanced? This is where most people's understanding of reincarnation gets it completely wrong. You don't just randomly get assigned a new body and circumstances. You actively participate in planning your next incarnation. According to Cayce's readings, souls in the between-life state can perceive potential future timelines. They can see various life paths they might take, various families they might be born into, various challenges they might face. And with the help of their spiritual counselors, they select the circumstances most likely to provide the lessons they need to learn. This means that difficult circumstances you were born into, the challenging family dynamics, the physical limitations, the socio-economic struggles, even the era and culture you incarnated within, were not cosmic accidents or divine punishments. They were choices your higher self made before birth because they provided optimal conditions for your soul's growth. Your soul looked at various options and said, essentially, yes, this will be difficult, but these specific challenges will force me to develop the exact qualities I'm lacking. Think about what you're struggling with right now in your life, the relationships that challenge you, the obstacles that seem unfair, the limitations that frustrate you. Cayce's teachings suggest that somewhere in the between-life realm, your higher self anticipated these exact challenges and thought, this is precisely what I need. That doesn't make the suffering less real or the challenges less difficult, but it fundamentally reframes the meaning. You're not a victim of random circumstances, but a soul deliberately engaging with a curriculum you designed. But here's where Cayce's teachings get even more complex and profound. The planning that occurs in the between-life state isn't just individual, it's collaborative. The souls you're closely connected to across lifetimes, what some traditions call your soul family or soul pod, also participate in the planning. That person who hurt you deeply in this life? Cayce suggested that in the between-life planning phase, you might have agreed to create that dynamic because you both had complementary lessons to learn. That parent who was difficult, you may have contracted with them before birth, both souls agreeing to play these roles for each other's growth. This is one of Cayce's most challenging teachings because it seems to remove the moral clarity we depend on. If the person who wronged you was actually fulfilling a contract you both agreed to before birth, does that mean they're not responsible? Cayce was clear that it doesn't work that way. Pre-birth agreements create opportunities for growth, but they don't eliminate free will or moral responsibility. The other person still chose, in the moment, how to act. They could have fulfilled the same lesson through different means, and they're creating their own karma through their choices, which they'll have to address in their own life review. What's happening in the between-life state while all this planning occurs? Cayce described various levels or dimensions souls can access based on their spiritual development. Less evolved souls remain in what he called the earth plane, or dimensions very close to physical reality. More advanced souls can access higher dimensions he associated with various planetary influences, not the physical planets themselves, but spiritual dimensions that ancient astrology tried to describe. The highest souls access what Cayce called the Christ consciousness or direct communion with divine source. Souls don't stay in one dimension throughout the entire between-life period. Cayce suggested that souls often spend time in multiple dimensions, each offering different types of learning and preparation. Some dimensions focus on healing from traumas of the previous life. Others emphasize creative expression or intellectual development. Higher dimensions offer opportunities to serve as guides for other souls still incarnating on Earth. The between-life state isn't passive waiting. It's active learning, growth, and preparation. Time functions completely differently in these dimensions. What we experience as decades or centuries on Earth might be experienced as simultaneous or non-linear in the between-life realm. This is why souls who've only been physically dead for a short time might report in mediumship sessions, having already undergone extensive experiences and growth. The between-life realm operates outside the temporal constraints we're subject to in physical bodies. One of the most profound aspects of Cayce's teachings on the between-life state is the concept of soul groups reuniting. Remember, Cayce taught that reincarnation isn't random. You tend to incarnate repeatedly with the same cluster of souls across multiple lifetimes, playing different roles for each other. Parent becomes child, child becomes sibling, sibling becomes friend, friend becomes adversary. The relationships shift, but the souls remain connected. In the between-life state, these soul groups reunite without the limitations and conflicts of physical existence. You see each other as you truly are, eternal beings engaged in mutual growth, rather than through the distorted lens of ego and physical limitation. Cayce emphasized that recognition in the between-life state is instant and complete. You don't need physical appearance to identify someone. Souls recognize each other through their unique vibrational signature, through the quality of consciousness they embody. That person you felt inexplicably drawn to the moment you met them. Cayce would say you're recognizing a soul you've known across many lifetimes. That person you instantly distrusted despite having no rational reason. You may be recognizing unresolved conflict from a previous shared incarnation. But here's what Cayce stressed repeatedly in his readings. Knowledge of the between-life state isn't meant to make you passive about your current life. Some people hear about reincarnation and pre-birth planning and conclude, well, if everything is predetermined and I chose these circumstances, I might as well just accept whatever happens. That's the exact opposite of what Cayce taught. Yes, you helped design the general circumstances and challenges of this life, but you designed them specifically to grow through actively engaging with them, not passively accepting them. The challenges you're facing are curriculum, not destiny. You chose to enroll in this particular course, but you still have to do the work. You still have to make choices. You still have to apply your will toward growth. The between-life planning creates opportunities, but your free will during physical life determines whether you actually learn the lessons those opportunities provide. You can complete this incarnation having learned what you came to learn, or you can resist and refuse and create the necessity of repeating similar lessons in yet another lifetime. This brings us to one of the most sobering aspects of Cayce's between-life teachings, the reality of wasted incarnations. Not every life successfully advances the soul's evolution. Some souls incarnate, become so lost in materialism and ego gratification that they completely forget their spiritual purpose, and then die having made no progress whatsoever, or worse, having regressed. In the life review, such souls confront the painful reality that they squandered an entire incarnation. Decades of physical existence that could have been used for growth were instead spent pursuing empty pleasures or accumulating meaningless status. Imagine standing in the between-life state, reviewing your most recent life and realizing you achieved nothing spiritually significant. You accumulated wealth but never learned generosity. You gained power but never learned compassion. You experienced pleasure but never learned love. You had opportunities to serve but chose self-interest. You encountered teachers but rejected their wisdom. You felt the pull of your higher purpose but silenced it with distractions. That life review would be devastating, not because an external judge condemns you, but because your own soul recognizes the opportunity wasted. Cayce was emphatic that spiritual progress isn't automatic or guaranteed. Reincarnation gives you repeated chances, but you can resist growth for lifetime after lifetime. Some souls, according to Cayce, become so entrenched in selfish patterns that they require dozens or even hundreds of incarnations to finally break free and begin genuine spiritual development. The universe is patient. You have as many lifetimes as you need. But each lifetime you waste is an opportunity lost, decades of potential growth that must now be pursued in future incarnations. So what determines the length of time between incarnations? Cayce indicated it varies tremendously, based on multiple factors. Some souls reincarnate very quickly, decades or even years after death, because they're eager to continue their growth or because they have urgent karmic situations to address. Other souls remain in the between-life state for what we would measure as centuries, spending extensive time learning in higher dimensions before feeling ready to return to physical existence. There's no universal formula. Each soul's journey is unique. What about souls who don't reincarnate at all? Cayce taught that eventually, after sufficient spiritual evolution across many lifetimes, souls graduate beyond the necessity of physical incarnation. They've learned all the lessons Earth can teach. They've balanced their karma. They've developed their spiritual capacities to the point where physical existence would no longer serve their growth. These highly evolved souls move into purely spiritual dimensions, where they often serve as guides and teachers for souls still working through their earthly incarnations. But we're talking about souls who've completed potentially hundreds or thousands of incarnations across vast spans of time. For most of humanity currently incarnate, many more physical lifetimes lie ahead. One of the most challenging aspects of Cayce's between-life teachings is what he said about awareness during the planning phase. In the between-life state, your consciousness is expanded. You can see the spiritual logic behind suffering, the growth that emerges from challenge, the cosmic justice of karmic law. From that elevated perspective, you might willingly choose a life that includes illness, poverty, persecution, or tragic loss, because you understand how it serves your soul's evolution. But then you're born. You incarnate into a physical body with a brain that doesn't remember any of that planning, and you experience the suffering without the expanded context that made you choose it. You feel like a victim of random injustice when you're actually experiencing exactly what your higher self selected. This is one of the profound spiritual dilemmas Cayce's teachings present. How do you reconcile the soul's wisdom in the between-life state with the ego's suffering in physical life? How do you honor both the higher self that chose these challenges and the human self that genuinely struggles with them? Cayce's answer was that spiritual practice, meditation, prayer, study, service, helps you remember. It creates moments where you reconnect with that higher perspective, where you glimpse the purpose behind your pain, where you access the wisdom your soul possessed before birth. He also emphasized the importance of spiritual preparation for death. If you live your physical life in complete materialism, denying any spiritual reality, then the moment of death becomes extremely disorienting. Your consciousness survives, but you have no framework for understanding what's happening. You may become one of those earthbound souls, confused and stuck. But if you've spent your life developing spiritual awareness, if you've meditated and prayed and studied and served, then death becomes a natural transition. You recognize what's happening. You're prepared for the life review. You can navigate the between-life state consciously and purposefully. This is why Cayce was so passionate about spiritual development during physical life. It's not just about being a good person or earning rewards in heaven. It's practical preparation for the most important transition you'll face. Every moment you spend in meditation is training for maintaining consciousness through death. Every act of selfless service is creating the kind of life review you'll want to experience. Every time you choose spiritual growth over ego gratification, you're building the soul strength that will allow you to navigate the between-life state wisely and plan your next incarnation effectively. Let's talk about what Cayce called soul fragments, or unintegrated aspects, because this reveals another layer of complexity about the between-life state. Sometimes, when a life includes severe trauma or profound inner conflict, parts of the soul's energy can become fragmented or stuck in particular experiences. In the between-life state, one of the tasks souls must accomplish is reintegrating these fragments, reclaiming these lost aspects of themselves. This is part of the healing work that occurs before planning the next incarnation. Souls that fail to do this reintegration work may carry those unresolved fragments into their next life as unexplained fears, irrational reactions, or psychological patterns that seem to have no connection to their current life experiences, because they don't. They're echoes of unhealed wounds from previous incarnations. Cayce also spoke about the role of prayer and focused intention from living souls toward those who've recently died. When you pray for a deceased loved one, when you send them love and light and intentions for their highest good, that energy reaches them in the between-life state. It provides support and comfort during their transition. It can help guide confused or earthbound souls toward the light. This is why so many spiritual traditions emphasize praying for the dead. It's not superstition, but recognition of a genuine metaphysical reality. Consciousness doesn't stop at death, and connections of love don't sever just because one soul has left physical form. But perhaps the most profound and challenging teaching Cayce offered about the between-life state is this. What you're experiencing right now, reading these words, living this life, struggling with these challenges, all of it was chosen by a version of you that exists in a state of expanded consciousness beyond what you can currently access. Before you were born, you saw this exact moment coming. You knew you'd face these specific struggles. You understood that at times you'd feel lost, confused, overwhelmed, doubtful. And you chose to incarnate anyway because something in these experiences, something in this very moment of confusion or pain or questioning, contains a lesson essential to your soul's evolution. Your higher self isn't distant or disconnected from you. It is you, the fullest, truest version of you that exists beyond the limitations of physical incarnation. Every intuition that whispers there's more to life than material existence, every longing for transcendence, every moment of recognizing deeper meaning beneath surface appearances. Those are your higher self communicating across the barrier of physical limitation, reminding you of what you knew in the between-life state and will know again when this incarnation ends. The tragedy isn't that life is hard or that suffering exists. The tragedy is forgetting why you're here, forgetting that you chose this, forgetting that every challenge is curriculum, every relationship is a teacher, every moment of confusion is an opportunity to remember who you really are. In the between-life state, you saw all of this clearly. You understood the spiritual logic underlying what appears to be random chaos. You committed to this journey with full knowledge of what it would entail. So when Cayce spoke about the between-life state, he wasn't just describing what happens after you die. He was describing the context that gives meaning to everything happening right now. You're not wandering randomly through a meaningless existence. You're enrolled in a carefully designed curriculum that you helped create. The final exam isn't death. It's how consciously you lived, how completely you remembered your purpose, how courageously you engaged with the lessons you came here to learn. That life review you'll experience when this incarnation ends, you're creating it right now. Every choice you make, every thought you think, every action you take, all of it is being recorded not by some external judge, but by your own consciousness. And when you transition to the between-life state and review this life you're currently living, will you see a soul that remembered its purpose and pursued it courageously? Or will you see a soul that forgot why it came here and spent its entire incarnation chasing distractions and avoiding the very challenges it chose to experience? The between-life state isn't something distant that happens after death. It's the larger context in which your current life is occurring. You came from there. You'll return there. And the choices you're making right this moment determine what that return will be like. Whether you'll face your life review with pride or regret, whether you'll have learned your lessons or merely survived, whether you'll have honored the contract your soul made or broken faith with your own higher purpose. Cayce's teachings on the between-life state aren't meant to comfort you with pleasant stories about heaven. They're meant to wake you up to the staggering responsibility and profound opportunity of being alive right now. You're not a victim of circumstances. You're a powerful eternal being who chose to limit yourself temporarily in physical form, specifically because these limitations create the friction necessary for spiritual growth. And one day, when your heart stops and your consciousness expands beyond physical constraint, you'll remember why you made that choice, and you'll have to answer to yourself about how well you honored it. If this resonates with you, If you feel that pull toward remembering your higher purpose, hit that like button and subscribe. Every soul watching this is being called to wake up, to remember why they're here, to engage more consciously with the curriculum they chose. Share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think you plan to learn in this lifetime? What challenges are you facing that might be exactly what your higher self knew you needed? We're all walking each other home, and every conversation brings us closer to remembering who we really are. Time isn't what you think it is, and Edgar Cayce proved it by accessing events that hadn't happened yet, while in a trance state that defied every law of physics we've been taught. In his psychic readings, Cayce didn't just predict future events with unsettling accuracy. He described time as a dimension the soul moves through like walking between rooms in a house, where past, present, and future exist simultaneously in what he called the eternal now. This wasn't mystical poetry. This was a man who repeatedly demonstrated that consciousness operates outside the linear timeline our clocks measure, accessing information from decades forward and centuries backward with equal ease. What if everything you were taught about time, that it flows in one direction, that the past is gone and the future hasn't arrived, is simply a limitation of physical perception, not reality itself? What if your soul already knows your entire life timeline, and the sense of moving forward through time is just an illusion of the material world? How would you live differently today if you understood that from your soul's perspective, you're simultaneously experiencing all your moments at once? Drop a comment sharing whether this understanding of time changes how you view your life's purpose and the choices you're making right now. There's a reason our entire civilization runs on clocks, calendars, and schedules that treat time like an arrow flying in one direction, from past through present toward future. We structure our entire existence around this assumption. We save for retirement assuming tomorrow will come. We regret yesterday, assuming it's irretrievably gone. We anxiously await the future, assuming it doesn't exist until we arrive there. But what if this fundamental assumption about reality, this thing we've built our entire psychological relationship with existence upon, is completely backwards? Edgar Cayce's trance states revealed something that modern physics is only now beginning to mathematically describe. Time as we experience it is a construct of physical consciousness, not an absolute property of reality itself. When Cayce entered his self-induced sleep state, his consciousness apparently operated from a vantage point where time didn't constrain perception the way it does in our waking awareness. He could look forward and describe events decades before they occurred. The stock market crash of 1929, the shifting of the Earth's magnetic poles, specific details about people's future health conditions. He could look backward and recount intricate details of lives lived in ancient Egypt, Atlantis, and Persia, with a specificity that couldn't have come from history books. This wasn't fortune-telling. This was accessing information from a dimension where time doesn't flow. It simply is. Cayce explained in his readings that the soul exists in eternity, which isn't endless time, but rather the absence of time altogether. From the soul's perspective, your entire life, birth to death and everything between, exists as a complete pattern, like a finished painting you can view all at once, rather than a painting being created one brushstroke at a time. Think about that for a moment. Right now you experience yourself at a single point you call now. You remember what you think of as the past, though you're actually just remembering a memory in this present moment. You anticipate the future, though you're actually just imagining possible scenarios in this same present moment. Your entire experience of time is actually happening in an eternal now. This moment is all you've ever actually experienced. Every memory, every anticipation, every thought about past or future, it's all occurring right here, right now, in the only moment that exists. Cayce's readings suggested that this present moment-only experience is what eternity actually means. The soul doesn't experience a timeline. The soul experiences an eternal now in which all moments exist simultaneously, accessible like chapters in a book that already exists in its complete form. When you're reading chapter 5, chapters 1 through 4 aren't destroyed or gone. They still exist in the book. And chapters 6 through 10 aren't yet to be written. They already exist. You simply haven't moved your awareness to them yet. This raises a question that should disturb you. If your soul already exists in this eternal now, where your entire life pattern is complete and present, why are you experiencing it as if you're moving through time in one direction, moment by moment, apparently unable to skip ahead or go backward? The answer, according to Cayce's readings, is educational. Your consciousness is deliberately focused into this time-sequential experience for the purpose of soul development. Imagine trying to appreciate a symphony if you heard all the notes simultaneously rather than in sequence. Imagine trying to learn from a story if you experienced the beginning, middle, and end all at once, rather than as an unfolding narrative. The linear time experience isn't a limitation of reality. It's a learning environment your soul has entered intentionally. You're experiencing time sequentially so you can learn cause and effect. So you can see how today's choices create tomorrow's consequences. So you can develop patience, anticipation, memory, hope, planning, wisdom, qualities that only make sense in a sequential time experience. Without the illusion of linear time, there would be no opportunity to develop faith, because faith requires not knowing what comes next. There would be no opportunity to develop courage, because courage requires facing an uncertain future. There would be no opportunity to develop wisdom, because wisdom comes from applying lessons learned from past experience to future challenges. But here's where it gets spiritually challenging. If your soul already exists in the eternal now, where your complete life pattern is present, does that mean your future is predetermined? Are you just acting out a script that's already written? Is free will an illusion? Cayce's readings address this paradox directly, and his explanation reconciles something philosophers have debated for millennia. Yes, your soul exists in eternity, where your complete life pattern is present. And yes, you have genuine free will in each moment. These aren't contradictory. They're two different perspectives on the same reality. From eternity's perspective, the soul sees all possible timelines simultaneously. Every potential choice and its consequences, every path and where it leads, every decision and its ripple effects through the pattern of life. The life you're living moment to moment is one specific path through these infinite possibilities, but it's not the only path that exists. Cayce explained that the soul chooses a general life pattern before incarnating, the major lessons to be learned, the key relationships to experience, the primary challenges to face. But within that chosen pattern, you have countless choice points where free will determines which specific pathway you'll take through the overall design. Think of it like a river flowing from mountain to sea. The general course, mountain to sea, is set. But the exact path the water takes involves millions of moment-to-moment choices around rocks, through channels, over falls, into pools. The destination is certain. The journey contains infinite variation. Your soul chose to make the journey from spiritual birth to spiritual maturity. The specific experiences, relationships, challenges, and lessons along the way involve your free will operating moment by moment. This is why Cayce could predict general patterns, major earth changes, broad social movements, archetypal life challenges, while specific details remained fluid based on collective and individual choices. The overall pattern exists in eternity. The specific manifestation unfolds through time-bound free will. Now here's where this understanding should radically change how you're living your life right now. If your soul exists in the eternal now, where your complete life pattern is present, that means your soul already knows whether you're fulfilling your life's purpose or wasting your incarnation. Your soul already knows whether you're walking the path you came here to walk or wandering in circles. Your soul already knows whether you're developing the qualities you came to develop or repeatedly choosing comfort over growth. And every moment of vague discontent, every whisper of, "There must be more than this," every flash of insight about changes you need to make, that's your soul, existing in the eternal now, where it can see your complete pattern, attempting to communicate through the time-bound consciousness you're experiencing right now. Cayce revealed in his readings that most people spend their entire lives ignoring these communications from their own soul. They silence the inner voice with distractions, rationalize away the growing sense that they're off path, explain away the increasing evidence that they're not living the life they came here to live. And from the soul's eternal perspective, this is tragic, because the soul can see that the fulfillment, peace, purpose, and joy this person is searching for isn't located in some distant future they're trying to reach. It's located on a different path, through the same time frame they're currently in, a path they keep choosing not to take. Let me make this personal and uncomfortable. What if your soul, from its eternal vantage point, is watching you repeat the same patterns, make the same mistakes, choose the same comforts over growth year after year, and the timeline where you break these patterns and step into your purpose isn't some distant future you haven't reached yet, but a parallel present you keep choosing not to enter? What if the life you're meant to be living isn't 10 years from now, after you've saved enough money, lost enough weight, gained enough confidence, or met the right person? What if the life you're meant to be living is the one you'd be living today if you made the choices your soul is prompting you to make, and you're not making them? This is the spiritual emergency most people are living in without recognizing it. They think they're moving through time towards some future moment when their real life will begin. But from the soul's eternal perspective, their real life, the one they came here to live, is accessible right now, in this eternal now, through different choices than the ones they're making. Cayce explained that the Akashic records, that cosmic library where every soul's complete pattern is recorded, doesn't just contain what has happened. It contains the full pattern of what the soul came to accomplish, which includes roads not taken, potentials not actualized, growth not achieved. When souls review their lives after death, according to Cayce's readings, the most painful part isn't judgment from God or punishment for sins. The most painful part is seeing clearly, from the eternal perspective, how close they came to fulfilling their purpose while repeatedly choosing not to. The soul sees the moment 20 years ago when a different choice would have set everything on course. The soul sees the opportunities that presented themselves again and again that were ignored or rationalized away. The soul sees the quiet inner voice that kept saying, "Not this way, this other way," that was silenced with logic and fear. And from eternity's perspective, where all moments exist simultaneously, these aren't regrets about a past that's gone. They're present realities of a pattern that remains incomplete. But here's the extraordinary implication of understanding time as Cayce described it. If all moments exist simultaneously in the eternal now, if the soul exists in eternity rather than time, if your complete life pattern is present rather than unfolding, then the moment 20 years ago when you could have made a different choice isn't actually gone. The opportunity 10 years ago you convinced yourself you missed isn't actually in an irretrievable past. They exist right now in the eternal present, accessible through the consciousness shift that Cayce demonstrated every time he entered trance. This is why Cayce emphasized meditation, prayer, and attunement to the divine so heavily in his readings. These practices aren't just about feeling peaceful or spiritual. They're about shifting your consciousness from the time-bound sequential perspective where you're trapped in linear experience to the eternal perspective where you can access your soul's view of your complete pattern. In meditation, when you move beyond mental chatter and physical awareness into deep stillness, you're touching the same eternal now that your soul exists in. And from that vantage point, guidance about your life path becomes accessible because you're temporarily viewing from the perspective that can see the whole pattern. This is why people sometimes have life-changing insights in meditation that seem to come from nowhere. They're not coming from nowhere. They're coming from the soul's eternal perspective, breaking through into time-bound awareness. The insight about the relationship you need to leave, the career you need to change, the healing you need to pursue, the forgiveness you need to extend. Your soul has been trying to communicate this from its eternal vantage point, but your time-bound consciousness has been too busy, too distracted, too defended to receive it. Let's confront what this means practically. Are you meditating regularly? Not as a stress reduction technique or productivity hack, but as a practice of attuning your time-bound consciousness to your soul's eternal perspective. Because according to Cayce, this is the primary tool for accessing the guidance that can realign your life with your purpose. And that guidance exists right now in the eternal present, not in some future moment when you finally get around to developing a spiritual practice. If you're not meditating, you're essentially choosing to remain trapped in the time-bound perspective where you can't access your soul's view of your complete life pattern. And every day that passes in sequential time where you're not making this choice is a day your soul, which exists in the eternal now, watches you walk further down a path that leads away from the purpose you came here to fulfill. Before we go deeper, if this perspective on time and soul purpose is challenging everything you thought you knew about your life, show your appreciation by hitting that like button and subscribing to this channel. We're exploring Edgar Cayce's most profound teachings about consciousness, time, and spiritual development, and your support helps more people access this life-changing wisdom. Cayce's readings revealed another dimension of time that should fundamentally change how you view your soul's journey. Reincarnation doesn't happen in the sequential time you're experiencing. From the soul's eternal perspective, all your incarnations, past, present, and future from the time-bound view, exist simultaneously in the eternal now. The life you think of as your past life in ancient Egypt isn't in the past from the soul's vantage point. It's happening now, in the eternal present. The life you might think of as a future incarnation isn't ahead of you in time. It's accessible now from the eternal perspective. This is why Cayce could access information about people's past lives with such specificity, because from the state of consciousness he operated in during trance, those lives weren't past. They were present, simultaneous, accessible. The Egyptian priest, the Atlantean healer, the Persian warrior, these weren't former versions of the soul. They're concurrent expressions of the soul's eternal existence, all happening now from a vantage point outside time. What this means for you living this specific incarnation is profound. The patterns you're struggling with in this life, the fear you can't shake, the relationship dynamic you keep repeating, the self-sabotage that undermines your success, these aren't just products of your childhood or your current psychology. According to Cayce's readings, they're often threads running through multiple incarnations that your soul is attempting to resolve. And because all these incarnations exist simultaneously in the eternal now, working on the pattern in this life affects it across all incarnations. When you finally face the fear, heal the relationship pattern, or break the self-sabotage in this present incarnation, you're not just fixing it going forward, you're healing it throughout the soul's eternal existence. This is why spiritual growth sometimes feels like more than personal improvement. It feels cosmic, ancestral, transpersonal, because it is. You're not just healing your individual psychology, you're healing patterns in the eternal now that affect your soul's complete expression across all its incarnations. But here's the question that should terrify and motivate you simultaneously. What if the pattern you're refusing to face in this lifetime is the same pattern your soul has been attempting to resolve across multiple incarnations? And from the eternal perspective where all these incarnations exist simultaneously, your soul can see that you're choosing the same avoidance again. What if the reason certain challenges keep appearing in your life isn't that the universe is punishing you or that you're unlucky, but that your soul from its eternal vantage point keeps creating opportunities for you to finally address the pattern you came here to heal? Cayce's readings made it clear that souls don't incarnate randomly. Each lifetime is carefully chosen to provide specific opportunities for growth, healing, and spiritual development. The family you were born into, the era you're living in, the challenges you face, the gifts you possess, these aren't accidents. They're precisely calibrated to give you exactly what your soul needs for this phase of its eternal journey. But, and this is crucial, incarnating into the right opportunities doesn't guarantee you'll make use of them. Free will means you can spend an entire lifetime avoiding the very challenges your soul incarnated to face. You can waste the opportunities, ignore the lessons, and reach death having circled the same patterns without growth. And from the soul's eternal perspective, this is a tragedy, not because you'll be punished, but because the opportunity this specific incarnation provided will have been missed. Let me ask you directly, do you know why your soul chose this lifetime? Do you know what patterns you came here to heal, what qualities you came to develop, what contribution you came to make? Because according to Cayce, your soul knows. In the eternal now where your soul exists, the complete purpose of this incarnation is clear. The question is whether your time-bound consciousness has quieted itself enough to receive that information. Most people spend their entire lives never asking this question. They absorb their culture's definitions of success, money, status, comfort, security, and pursue these without ever wondering whether their soul came here for something entirely different. They reach midlife having achieved everything their culture told them to achieve, feeling profoundly empty, wondering, is this all there is? And the answer from the soul's eternal perspective is, no, this isn't what you came here for. The time-sequential experience you're having creates an illusion that you have endless time to figure this out. You'll get serious about spiritual development later, after you've established your career. You'll pursue your soul's purpose eventually, after you've accumulated enough financial security. You'll face your deepest patterns someday, when the circumstances are more convenient. But here's what Cayce's understanding of time reveals. From your soul's eternal perspective, later isn't a future moment you haven't reached yet. Later is part of the present pattern you're creating through today's choices. When you say, I'll get to spiritual development later, what your soul hears is, I'm choosing a pattern where spiritual development isn't prioritized, and that pattern extends through the entire incarnation unless it's consciously interrupted. This is why Cayce emphasized that spiritual transformation must begin now, in this moment, not someday when conditions are perfect. Because now is the only time that exists. The eternal now where your soul operates isn't a future moment you'll arrive at. It's this moment, recognized from an eternal perspective rather than a time-bound perspective. Every moment you're living sequentially is simultaneously a moment in your soul's eternal existence. Right now, as you're processing these words, your consciousness has a choice. Remain trapped in the time-bound perspective, where you're just moving from one moment to the next, reacting to circumstances, controlled by patterns, living unconsciously, or shift into alignment with your soul's eternal perspective, where this moment is recognized as an opportunity for conscious choice that affects your entire pattern. This shift, from time-bound to eternal awareness, is what Cayce meant by Christ consciousness. It's not a religious concept. It's a state of consciousness where the individual awareness aligns with the eternal perspective. Jesus, in Cayce's readings, demonstrated continuous operation from this eternal awareness, rather than time-bound consciousness. His statement, "Before Abraham was, I am," wasn't metaphorical. It was a literal description of consciousness operating from the eternal now rather than sequential time. When Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," Cayce's readings interpreted this as demonstrating the path of consciousness, from time-bound awareness trapped in sequential experience, to eternal awareness that recognizes all moments existing simultaneously in God's eternal now. This is the consciousness shift available to every soul, the purpose behind every incarnation, the destination of spiritual development. And here's where I need to ask you the most important question of this entire video. Are you living as if you have endless time, or are you living as if this moment is the only moment that exists, which it is? Are you postponing spiritual development, soul work, and alignment with your purpose as if there's a future time when you'll finally get serious about it? Or are you recognizing that from your soul's eternal perspective, this pattern of postponement isn't preparing for future spiritual work? It is the spiritual work and you're failing it? Are you making today's choices based on what will create temporal comfort and security, or based on what will align this present moment with your soul's eternal purpose? Are you listening to the quiet inner voice that keeps suggesting different choices than the ones you're making? Or are you silencing it with logic, fear, and rationalization? Your soul, existing in the eternal now, already knows the answers to these questions. It knows whether this incarnation is fulfilling its purpose or wasting its opportunity. It knows whether you're walking the path you came here to walk or wandering in comfortable circles. And every moment of discontent, every whisper of, there must be more, every flash of insight about needed changes, that's your soul attempting to communicate from its eternal perspective into your time-bound awareness. The question isn't whether this guidance is available. The question is whether you're creating space to receive it. The question is whether you're willing to let it disturb your comfortable patterns. The question is whether you're willing to make the changes it suggests, even when those changes are inconvenient, uncomfortable, or countercultural. Because here's what Cayce's understanding of time makes unavoidably clear. You're not preparing for some future spiritual life. This is it. This moment right now is your spiritual life, and the choices you're making in this eternal now are creating the pattern that your soul will review from the eternal perspective after this incarnation ends. Take a moment and truly feel the weight of what that means. Not someday, right now. This present moment is your soul's eternal existence expressing itself in sequential time for the purpose of growth, learning, and spiritual development. Are you using it for that purpose? Or are you lost in distraction, fear, comfort-seeking, and unconscious patterns? If this message is shaking something awake in you, if you're recognizing that you've been living as if you have endless time when time itself is an illusion designed to help you develop qualities that only make sense in sequential experience, then demonstrate your commitment to your soul's purpose by liking this video, subscribing to this channel, and sharing your reflection in the comments. Tell me, does understanding that your soul exists in the eternal now, watching whether you're fulfilling or wasting this incarnation's purpose, change the choices you're about to make? Your soul already knows the answer. The question is whether you're finally ready to align your time-bound consciousness with that eternal wisdom. Edgar Cayce revealed that Atlantis didn't fall because of natural disasters. It was deliberately destroyed by its own technology, and the survivors made the conscious choice to hide that knowledge from future generations. In his trance states, Cayce described crystalline power sources so advanced they could transmit energy wirelessly across continents, levitate massive stones, and even manipulate the fabric of consciousness itself. But here's what makes this terrifying. The Atlanteans didn't lose control of their technology through ignorance. They lost control because they chose power over spiritual development, and the universe responded accordingly. The crystals that once powered their civilization became weapons in a spiritual war between those who served divine purposes and those who sought to dominate and control. What Cayce saw in his readings wasn't just ancient history. It was a warning about what happens when technological advancement races ahead of spiritual maturity. And if you look at our world today, with artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and weapons capable of planetary destruction, we're rapidly approaching the same crossroads that destroyed Atlantis. The question isn't whether we'll rediscover their technology, it's whether we'll repeat their mistakes. Share in the comments. Do you think humanity is spiritually ready for the technology we're creating right now? When Edgar Cayce entered his trance states and accessed what he called the Akashic records, he described a civilization that sounds like science fiction, yet he insisted it was historical fact. Atlantis, according to Cayce's readings, wasn't a primitive society destroyed by myth and legend. It was a technological superpower that achieved advances we're only beginning to understand today, and its destruction came not from the gods or natural catastrophe, but from a deliberate choice to weaponize knowledge that should have remained sacred. Cayce spoke of the Great Crystal, sometimes called the Tuaoi Stone or Firestone, a massive crystalline structure that served as the primary power source for Atlantean civilization. This wasn't a primitive gemstone, it was a sophisticated energy converter that could capture and concentrate solar, lunar, and stellar radiation, then broadcast that energy wirelessly to power vehicles, buildings, and devices across the continent. The Atlanteans had solved the energy crisis we still struggle with today. No fossil fuels, no power lines, no pollution, pure, clean energy transmitted through the atmosphere itself. But the technology went far beyond simple power generation. Cayce revealed that the crystals could be tuned to specific frequencies that affected human consciousness, healing the body, expanding awareness, or, in the wrong hands, controlling the minds and wills of others. The Atlanteans discovered that everything in the universe operates on vibrational frequencies, and they learned to manipulate those frequencies with precision. They could levitate massive stone blocks for construction, create force fields for protection, and establish instantaneous communication across vast distances. They had achieved what we would call anti-gravity, telepathy, and energy medicine, all through their mastery of crystalline technology. Think about what that means for a moment. Imagine a civilization where disease could be cured by adjusting your body's energy frequency, where buildings floated into place without cranes or labor, where you could communicate mind to mind with someone on the other side of the world, where unlimited clean energy was available to everyone, freely. This wasn't fantasy. According to Cayce, this was everyday reality in Atlantis at its height. So why don't we have this technology today? Why was it lost? Here's where Cayce's readings become a spiritual warning rather than just a historical account. Atlantean society, Cayce explained, eventually split into two factions with fundamentally opposing philosophies. The children of the Law of One believed that technology should serve spiritual development and be used according to divine principles, healing, creating, elevating consciousness, and serving the greater good. The sons of Belial, by contrast, saw technology as a means to power, control, and material dominance. They wanted to use the crystals not to serve humanity, but to enslave it, to create a permanent ruling class that controlled energy, resources, and even the consciousness of the masses. This wasn't a political disagreement. It was a spiritual war that would determine the fate of an entire civilization. The sons of Belial began experimenting with the Great Crystal in ways that violated natural law. They increased its power output beyond safe levels, seeking ever greater energy to fuel their ambitions. They tuned the crystals to frequencies that could weaponize consciousness, creating what Cayce described as tools of mass hypnosis and mind control. They built what we might today call directed energy weapons, beams of concentrated power that could destroy from a distance. And in their arrogance, they believed they could master forces they didn't spiritually understand. Cayce was clear about what happened next. The misuse of the crystals created instabilities in the earth itself. The excessive energy being channeled through these massive structures began causing volcanic eruptions and earthquakes. The Atlanteans had literally cracked the foundation of their own continent by using technology without wisdom. The first destruction came as a warning, massive earthquakes and the beginning of the land breaking apart. But instead of changing course, the sons of Belial doubled down, convinced they could technology their way out of the crisis they'd created. The second destruction was more severe. Larger portions of the continent sank beneath the waves. Still, remnants of Atlantis survived, and still the spiritual war continued. The children of the Law of One pleaded for restraint, for a return to using technology in harmony with divine law. The sons of Belial refused, certain that just a little more power, just a little more control, would solve everything. The final destruction, Cayce revealed, came around 10,000 BC. The Great Crystal, pushed beyond any reasonable limit, unleashed forces that literally tore the continent apart. In what Cayce described as a single catastrophic event, the remaining landmass of Atlantis shattered and sank beneath the Atlantic Ocean. Millions died. An entire civilization, its cities, its knowledge, its achievements, vanished beneath the waves in what survivors would later recall as a great flood. But here's the crucial detail that answers why this technology wasn't preserved. It was a conscious choice by the survivors. The children of the Law of One who escaped to Egypt, Central America, and other locations before the final cataclysm made a deliberate decision. They would preserve the knowledge of Atlantis, yes, but they would seal it away until humanity was spiritually ready to use it wisely. Cayce spoke of Hall of Records in 3 locations: beneath the Sphinx in Egypt, in the Yucatan Peninsula, and in the submerged ruins of Atlantis itself. These weren't just libraries, they were time capsules, protected by those who understood that knowledge without spiritual maturity is catastrophically dangerous. The records contained not just the history of Atlantis, but the technical specifications of their technology, the scientific principles they'd discovered, the engineering that had made their civilization possible. And it was deliberately hidden, sealed, protected, not because the knowledge was evil, but because humanity wasn't ready for it, wouldn't be ready for thousands of years, might not be ready even now. Think about the spiritual sophistication required to make that choice. These survivors had witnessed the complete annihilation of their homeland because of technological misuse. They possessed knowledge that could rebuild civilization, solve energy crises, cure diseases, revolutionize construction and transportation. They could have used that knowledge to make themselves rulers of the ancient world, gods among primitive peoples. Instead, they chose to hide it, because they understood a truth we're only beginning to grasp. Advanced technology in spiritually immature hands doesn't elevate civilization, it destroys it. Cayce indicated that the Atlantean refugees did preserve some knowledge carefully adapted to the spiritual level of the cultures they joined. The mystery schools of Egypt, the sacred sciences of the Mayans, the esoteric knowledge passed down through secret societies. These were fragments of Atlantean wisdom, carefully meted out over millennia, teaching principles of energy, consciousness, and universal law without revealing the full technical applications that had proven so dangerous. Now, here's where this becomes uncomfortably relevant to our present moment. Look at where we are technologically. We have nuclear weapons capable of destroying civilization multiple times over. We're developing artificial intelligence that might soon surpass human intelligence. We're manipulating genes, editing the fundamental code of life itself. We're creating surveillance systems that track every movement, every communication, every transaction. We're building technologies that can influence consciousness through social media algorithms that hack human psychology for profit and control. Do you see the parallel? Are we the children of the law of one, seeking to use technology for healing and elevation? Or are we the sons of Belial, racing to develop more power, more control, more dominance, without asking whether we should? Cayce's readings about Atlantis weren't ancient history lessons, they were warnings. He was showing us what happens when a civilization prioritizes technological power over spiritual development. When the ability to do something becomes more important than the wisdom to know whether it should be done. When material advancement races ahead of consciousness evolution. The Atlanteans could transmit energy wirelessly. We're working on that now. They could manipulate consciousness through frequency. We're exploring that through neural interfaces and brain-computer connections. They could engineer genetics. We're doing that with CRISPR and gene therapy. They had weapons that could destroy from a distance. We have drones, satellites, and directed energy systems. They split their society between those who wanted to serve humanity and those who wanted to control it. Look at our world and tell me we haven't done the same. The technology that destroyed Atlantis wasn't too powerful in an absolute sense. It was too powerful for the spiritual state of those who wielded it. And that's the real question we face today. Not can we develop these technologies, but should we? Not can we control these forces, but are we conscious enough to use them wisely? Cayce saw in his readings that the Hall of Records would be discovered when humanity reached a point of being ready to receive that knowledge without destroying itself again. Some interpret this as a specific year or event. Others understand it as a threshold of collective consciousness, a moment when enough human beings have elevated their awareness, developed their spiritual maturity, and committed to using power in service of love rather than control. The technology of Atlantis hasn't been lost. It's been protected, kept safe from us until we're capable of handling it. And the key to unlocking those records isn't archaeological, it's spiritual. It's not about finding the right cave or digging beneath the right pyramid. It's about becoming the kind of people who can be trusted with that knowledge. So when the title asks whether Atlantean technology was too powerful and dangerous to be preserved, the answer is nuanced. It was preserved but deliberately hidden because previous experience proved beyond doubt that power without wisdom is civilizational suicide. The question isn't whether the technology was dangerous, it's whether we've learned the lesson Atlantis taught through its destruction. Have we developed the spiritual maturity to handle the technology we already have, let alone the advanced knowledge hidden in those sealed records? When you look at how we use social media, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and nuclear power, do you see the children of the law of one using technology in harmony with divine principles? Or do you see the sons of Belial racing to accumulate more power, more control, more dominance, regardless of the consequences? Cayce's readings challenge us to recognize that technological advancement without spiritual development isn't progress. It's a countdown to catastrophe. Atlantis didn't fall because its technology was inherently evil. It fell because the people using that technology chose power over principle, control over consciousness, domination over service. And here's the most sobering part of Cayce's message. We're being tested right now with the same choice. Every technology we develop, every scientific breakthrough we achieve, every new power we acquire, each one is an opportunity to choose. Will we use this to heal or to harm, to liberate or to control, to serve the divine plan or to play God ourselves? The survivors of Atlantis made their choice when they sealed the records. They chose to protect future generations from knowledge we weren't ready to handle. They understood that the most dangerous thing you can give an immature consciousness is unlimited power. They learned through the complete destruction of their civilization that wisdom must precede power, that spiritual development must guide technological capability. That consciousness evolution is the prerequisite for any technology that can reshape reality itself. If you're watching this and feeling a sense of urgency, that's appropriate. If you're sensing that we're approaching a critical threshold as a civilization, Cayce would say you're perceiving accurately. If you're wondering whether we'll make the same mistakes Atlantis made, that's the question we're all being asked to answer through our choices, our priorities, and our commitment to spiritual growth. The technology of Atlantis was too powerful for the Atlanteans at their level of spiritual development. The question that should keep us awake at night is this: is the technology we're creating right now too powerful for us at our level of spiritual development? Are we rushing toward the same catastrophe, making the same choices, prioritizing the same values that led to the destruction of the most advanced civilization in ancient history? Cayce saw the fall of Atlantis not as ancient history, but as a mirror reflecting our present and a warning about our future. He saw the sealed records not as lost knowledge, but as protected wisdom, waiting for us to become worthy of receiving it. He saw our current technological explosion not as inevitable progress, but as a spiritual test. Are we ready to handle what we're creating? Before you click away from this video, ask yourself, what would Edgar Cayce say about the life you're living right now? Are you developing spiritually as rapidly as technology is advancing around you? Are you choosing to be a child of the law of one,